שמחה להציג את הדוברת השנייה בפאנל שלנו, דוקטור חווה מוריס. לדוקטור מוריס יש תארים מתקדמים במדעי ההתנהגות והיסטוריה מודרנית מאוניברסיטת לונדון, אנגליה. יש לה תואר בעבודה סוציאלית מאוניברסיטת קולומביה בניו יורק, היא פסיכואנליטיקאית בגישה יונגיאנית, חברה של ה-IAAP וחברה מן המניין באגודה לאנליזה קבוצתית בינלאומית. עיקר מחקרה נוגע בקשרים בין העולם הנפשי האינטרפסיכי לבין הסביבה החיצונית של האדם, השפעות פסיכולוגיות בין דוריות של השואה, ולאחרונה מעמיקה עניין ומחקר בתחום הזקנה. אז תודה רבה לך חווה, ואנחנו מצפים לשמוע אותך.
שלום, אני מוכרחה להגיד קשה לי להאמין שאני פה ומשתתפת באירוע הזה. זה בערך 20 שנה מאז שאני השתתפתי בכנס. אני איכשהו מרגישה שאני פה כדי לייצג את but I'll talk English because I'm very glad I've been permitted by you to talk English, and it's still one of the characteristics of old age, that your second language disappears and becomes more distant as you get older. I'm 92, and I feel that I am representing the subject of the conference, that I am really the representative of the subjective aspect of old age. I'm very glad, very much appreciate your inviting me. I called my talk for today, Old Men Ought to Be Explorers, which is a quotation from Shakespeare. I do not accept old age. I deal with it. This is the answer I got from my friend Stella when she was 98, and I had asked her whether she accepted old age. But what is old age today? What is it we're trying to deal with? When I was browsing through the pages of the Aging and Society of the Cambridge University Press of March 1982, I wondered how far we are today from the two entries I found there. Unfortunately, I've been unable to find the precise quotation of the first. Could that possibly be connected with age? It reported that considerable progress was being made in the care of nursing patients, aged nursing patients. Nurses no longer collected their teeth before sleep at night in a collective basket, but sorted them out so that each person would be able to find their own teeth. The second entry that appealed to me was by Helen Evers, and as she says, it can be argued and illustrated below that explicit inclusion of the patients and their families in team decisions can be expected to cause great problems for the professionals. The patients can be awful troublemakers. So how far have we come in our society? Perhaps the difference between that society and ours is that at that time it was clear that the aged were more or less helpless objects, hopeless cases to be managed. Whereas today there is more confusion than clarity on this subject because of the constant changes in our lives. It seems to me that the only thing that is constant is caused by constant, the only thing that is constant is the knowledge that the decline in strength, energy, and functioning today is accompanied by unpredictable changes in our lives daily, demanding constant decisions. My observation of this started with a conversation with Miriam, a friend of mine whom I had not seen for 40 years. Before we even sat down, she said to me, doesn't it make you mad when a strange young man leans over you and says in a honeyed voice, Sasta, at עדיין נוהגת? כל הכבוד. And then we sat down and tried to understand why did this infuriate and offend us so much? What do we want? It became clear to me that we ourselves have no picture of how we want to see ourselves and how we want to be related to. And there are, of course, no clear standards or models. The only fact that it's constant is the constant repetition of change. We never thought that the main characteristic we would need to develop, if we didn't have it before, is flexibility. We cannot expect anyone to know how we want to be related to. It is our responsibility to indicate this to the others. It is with this in mind that I initiated a workshop to explore the world of the aging. And I will read, did you ever imagine that you would grow old? How do we live this time of our lives? Can we still grow? In this group, we should seek our own individual way, learning from each other's unique knowledge and experience, both on a personal and theoretical level, exploring how we can still grow, delight in the present, and create new meaning in life, while not avoiding issues of decline in health or faculties, and its accompanying sadness. We should address questions of health, finance, housing, mobility, and of course, personal relationships. I myself in her 80s, I was then, and I live these questions daily. In my workshop, I seek to explore, together with the participants, the many layered facets of this period of our lives, understanding that we are experiencing, and we want to do this from different angles, fully aware that we are traveling into an unknown future. Today, everything works so rapidly in both the world we live in and our own individual processes of aging. We become increasingly a separate population, marginalized and infantilized. Not only is our society hardly aware of this, but we, the aged, are not aware of it ourselves and the implications of what is happening. The events at the beginning of the corona pandemic highlighted this with the declaration that the aged, us, we are the most vulnerable people in society and need to be protected. We must be isolated and eventually even locked up. Why did nobody think of inviting us to participate in the decision making? This process of marginalization was so deeply felt in the problems of communication brought about by the advantage of technology and the ever-increasing reliance on it for all sources of information. To be unconnected in this means being cut off. The difficulties encountered while trying to work with technology may well be the source of frequent expressions of helplessness and resignation. מה נעשה? ככה זה. This came as a result of the workshops of the aging that I've been carrying on in the last few years. Participants frequently comment at the end of the series that they feel empowered, connected to moments of the inner world and realization that one can live in the present and appreciate each day as if it were the last. There are three major elements that seem to me that are required to achieve this. The one is autonomy. The second is a sense of identity, worth, and self. And three, as I said, flexibility. Yes, in old age. One of the major outcomes in my workshop is the understanding of the importance of the place of our own sense of our autonomy. We cannot expect people to know what we want, how to relate to us, if we do not know how we wish to be related to. This means looking at, addressing at how we want to live, how we want to be age, how we want to age, and yes, and how we want to end our lives. There is a great difference between independence and autonomy. Autonomy is the right to make decisions about myself, even when I cannot carry them out on my own. I shall not lose my sense of autonomy if I decide to leave the decision-making about my well-being to someone else, if they are doing this at my request. I want to bring an example of a sad example of a failure of this. One of the participants in one of the workshops, let's call her Louise, she was a very vivid participant. She would come every week, arriving early, reluctant to go. At the beginning, she was silent. And when addressed by others, she said she couldn't hear and that her memory had gone. Members of the group somehow seemed to feel some kind of empathy for her and started giving her advice on different hearing aids. She ignored them totally. And then one day, when the group was involved in discussing children and grandchildren, out of the blue, in a casual conversational tone, as at a tea party, she related to us that she had left her first husband because he refused to have children. And then when she'd finally married a second time, it had already been too late. She added casually that while she was not married, she had a number of romances with married men, and they resulted in abortions. And then she fell silent. The group continued where it had been. Later, some members of the group came to me and expressed their impression that she was demented because of the irrelevance of the story. I heard this story as the tragedy of her life. She had a code of her own of communicating to us. I did not have the impression that she was demented. A few weeks later, she suddenly stopped coming. When we inquired what had happened, her caregiver informed us that her lawyer thought that it was not necessary for her to come to our workshop, and he would not allow her to pay for it. To our astonishment and horror, it appeared that without us having any idea of this, she was given a guardian. The shocked discussion afterwards of how this could possibly have happened led to our inviting a lawyer from Yad Sarah, whose field is to explain to us what the process of receiving a guardian is. It was absolutely common in the entire group. Everybody had, without a doubt, realized they have to make a will. The idea of expressing their autonomy had not occurred to anybody. It appears to be shockingly easy to take away the autonomy from aged people. Due to the decline of our physicality, of course, there is an increase in dependence, which generally invites a sense of power on those on whom we depend. This may express itself in patronage, infantilization, and violence. The feeling of loss of physical strength forces us to collaborate with this patronage. We are pushed into projective identification. In other words, become the person that we sense our protective patronizer imagines us to be. For example, there was a group of women from very different backgrounds, and though they brought up different subjects, each time somehow that they talked about the same one, they always arrived at talking at the same time. This was their disappointment in their own children. It was started by one we shall call Chava, an ex-kibbutznik, recounting with tears in her eyes how her small grandson had said to her yesterday she could go home. The babysitter had already arrived. To great amazement, this subject became the shared subject of all the women present, returning to it again and again, and feeling the great sadness and failure in the way they had brought up their own children. This shared sense of failure could not solve their problem. They realized that the situation clearly created by their children, the desire to live beyond their income, and the expectation that her parents would babysit with their children, while they themselves devoted themselves to their careers, could not be change likely. But by seeing the situation as a shared social problem and separating them from their own particular individual circumstances, they regained their sense of self, and it has helped them to confront their children, try to establish a different form of communication with them, and reacquire their sense of self-respect and identity. As I mentioned before, the only thing that is constant in the process of aging is the knowledge that the decline is accompanied by unpredictable daily changes in our lives. In the aging person, you've got to be doubly flexible. You've got to adapt yourself to the changes in your own physicality, in your strength, in your energy, and in the functionings. And these changes are coupled with the extraordinary rapid changes today that are forced on you by external circumstances, so that continually you have to be making decisions about where you live, how you live, with whom you live, how you are looked after, how the arrangements within the bureaucracy of our lives are changed. There is no moment of relaxation and a sense of calm and security, of security and continuity. The conversation with Miriam had led me to my idea of collecting a bunch of people who would accompany me on an exploration of what we were experiencing. Eventually, it turned into a group of people who met once a week for an hour and a half for 12 sessions, who raised and discussed any aspect whatsoever of aging that we encountered. I used the model of Pichon-Rivier, who recognized the close linking between all aspects of living, all forms of relating, and different ways of processing our experiences. Each workshop acquired its unique character, and each participant presented a totally different angle to a similar experience. Though this was not advertised as the object of the workshop, participants invariably commented on the sense of empowerment achieved, and they very much stressed their appreciation of the fact that I was one of them and lived and shared their experiences together with them. This in itself could be very interesting for discussion. One of the things that the process of the workshop has led is that feeling that we are free to age normatively without being influenced necessarily by outside expectations. We can take our place in the life of society, make our subjective voice heard, and feel that we have a place in being part of the life of our world, even at a very high old age. Thank you for listening to me.
It was a little bit hard to follow you, and I really feel that I need to read it now carefully to fully understand everything that you said. I picked up a few very important things. One of them is a sense of autonomy. I think one of the major issues in aging, that we find it in the psychology of aging is the fight for autonomy. I'll talk in Hebrew, is that okay? באמת מלחמת עולם שמנהלים אנשים זקנים לשמור על האוטונומיה שלהם. אז אנחנו לא מדברים על האוטונומיה הפסיכולוגית בהכרח, אבל באמת להיות מסוגלים אלה שמחליטים איך הם רוצים לחיות, אלה שמחליטים איך הם רוצים לנהל את החיים שלהם, ואנחנו רואים את המאבקים האלה בעיקר אצל האוכלוסייה הזקנה הירודה, אותם אנשים זקנים שבאמת הופכים להיות מוגבלים ומנהלים הרבה פעמים מלחמות עולם, לא להכניס מטפלת הביתה, לא לוותר על רישיון הנהיגה, לא לענות לכל מיני דרישות של הילדים או בני המשפחה שלהם לעבור לדיור מוגן או לקבל עזרה, ואנחנו חייבים להבין את זה כפסיכולוגים, כי זאת באמת המלחמה לאוטונומיה, וכל זמן שיש אנרגיה ויש אפשרות להילחם, עד שהיא לא הופכת להיות מלחמה מסוכנת כמובן, כשהאדם במצב קוגניטיבי ירוד, אז זה דבר מאוד מאוד חשוב. אני חושבת שהמחשת את זה מאוד יפה, וגם המחשת איך אנחנו כמטפלים, הרבה פעמים בתהליך של projective identification, חווים את כל חוסר האונים של בן אדם הזה, כן. זאת אומרת, הוא נשאר אוטונומי, אנחנו מתמודדים עם חוסר האונים שלנו, והיכולת שלכם לקיים מפגש קבוצתי כזה, של אנשים בגיל הזקנה, ולשוחח על הזקנה ולהרגיש חופשיים, אולי ממחישה יותר מהכל, מה זה הסובייקטיביות של הזקנה במיטבה. אז באמת, תודה רבה לך.
לי זה היה ברור מאליו שכל הדברים האלה, שאנחנו כאילו באופן פסיבי נדחפים אליהם, היא תוצאה של הקושי, זה פה עניין של קונפליקט בקשר ליכולת שלנו ליצור ולהיות קשורים לאוטונומיה הפסיכולוגית שלנו, כדי להיות נאמנים לה, ולא להיכנע לכל הלחצים שהחברה מפעילה אלינו, ואנחנו תלויים בהם. זאת אומרת שיש פה עניין של, באמת מה שאת אומרת, תחושת התלות, לא רק באופן פסיכולוגי, אבל גם באופן מעשי, ומאוד מאוד קונקרטי, והקונפליקט בין הרצון לפייס אותם אנשים, ולמצוא חן ביניהם, כדי להבטיח לעצמנו יחס טוב, ובשביל זה אנחנו נכנעים לעתים קרובות עם היכולת הפנימית שלנו להתקשר לאוטונומיה הפנימית שלנו, ולכן לרדת לדיכאון ולחרדה וחוסר תחושת התמצאות אפילו. זאת אומרת שזה באמת אחד הגורמים הכי מרכזיים וחשובים בתחושת הקיום. אני חושבת בכל עת, אבל בוודאי שבגיל הזקנה.
אז
בעצם מה שניסיתי להגיד כל הזמן, שיש כאילו תחושה של התנגדות של החברה לקבל את הזקן כלא אובייקט לטיפול, אלא כסובייקט שהוא חי וקיים, ויש לו קול, ויש לו זכויות, ויש לו חובה, ואולי באמת חובה, ולא רק זכות להביע את קולו, ולקחת חלק בחיים היומיים והכלליים והחברתיים ואפילו הפוליטיים, שאנחנו עדיין קיימים היום, ולא אובייקט לטיפול ולהתחשבות וללטיפה על הראש.
תודה רבה, ותראו כמה זה חשוב לא לדבר על, אלא לשמוע את, ואני חושבת שזה מרתק, ודרך אגב, את המחשת את זה מאוד יפה, כי כשאני ביקשתי מחווה, שתשלח לי את ההרצאה שלה כדי שאני אקרא על מה היא הולכת לדבר, ואני גם אעכל אותה, אז נתת לי תשובה מאוד נחמדה. כתבת לי, נכון, אני מנסה לתרגם במילים פשוטות, שבגיל שלך את יכולה להרשות לעצמך משהו כמו לא להיות מוכנה ולא לשלוח הרצאה, ואיכשהו זה החופש שיש, ורק עוד דבר קטן בהקשר הזה, בעצם כל המחקרים שעוסקים היום ברווחה נפשית חיובית, שקרול ריף מובילה, הם מדברים על 6 מפתחות לרווחה נפשית חיובית. בזקנה, המפתח הראשון הוא self-acceptance, והמפתח השלישי הוא a sense of autonomy. אז אין ספק שכל המושג של אוטונומיה הוא מאוד משמעותי,